panel over to Praveen and Ritesh and Hari and Luca to discuss the AI agent that onboards, coaches, and upskills without a human in the loop.
Hello.
Just give us a second as we get the other members of your panel on.
Hey, hi, Paul. I hope you're able to see me and hear me.
Yes, we are. And
Fantastic.
I'll hand it over to you and your panel. So take it away. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been a wonderful, keynote address by Charlotte and a wonderful conversation so far. I'm, really excited to sort of have my panel, discuss on a slightly different topic. Hopefully we'll keep it, we'll sort of meet the benchmark that you've set, Paul and Charlotte did, and try and keep it as interesting as possible. I'll probably just give it a minute because I can see Ritesh has joined in. I think we were admitted to the rooms as attendees and now being sort of shuffled back as panel speakers and presenters. So we'll probably just give it a minute for Hari and
I have joined in as well.
oh, fantastic. So you've joined in. I see Luca is there as well, and so is Ritesh. Sorry, let me try and get my view organized. Fantastic. Okay, great. We seem to have everyone on board. Firstly, I want to thank the audience for being patient. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and I know it could be late evening for some people who have signed up from the Asia region. So thank you very much for the patience, and we'll try and keep this interactive. Keep your questions coming. This topic promises to be an interesting one. I'll probably borrow a few things that got mentioned by Charlotte in the keynote address, but we'll try and keep this as interactive as possible. So the topic that we're going to address today and try and sort of flesh out a little bit and discuss is the AI agent that onboards, coaches, upskills people without human in the loop. Yeah. So I think the key there is without human in the loop, and we'll see what our panel, our experts and the stalwarts we have both from the education industry and the tech industry, what they have to say. I'll try and sort of outline how we're going to go about doing this. So, I'll throw open a few questions to our panel and just keep it open. I'm not going to have a question directed to a particular panelist. It's just going to be a free conversation. I've in fact requested our panel speakers to use the opportunity to present a counter view or challenge each other's views. So hopefully that will keep it engaging and interesting. So we'll spend about 20-25 minutes doing that discussion, and I want to be very conscious about the audience's effort in being around here, and we'll try and capture as many audience questions as we can, and we'll keep about 8 to 10 minutes aside towards the end for any audience questions. So quick introduction. I'm Praveen. I have about 35 years of experience, mostly at the cusp of technology and banking and financial services. I'm currently based in Mumbai in India. I worked with firms such as TCS and Accenture, again, both in India and abroad, work mainly with banking and financial services clients. I've also worked for about 13 years with an investment bank as a CEO for technology. I was based in the GCC, as they call them today, or what were called as in-house centers or captives earlier on, based here in India. I worked with Nomura for about 13 years, where I was leading the technology division. And the last couple of years, I've been sort of doing some freelance consulting and some advisory, including helping Paul and his team with inputs wherever I can. I'm also engaged in a board advisory role with a company called AlphaTub, which is essentially a AI-enabled early child education platform. Again, global presence, and its focus is on language learning for early child education. And I'm also a non-investee partner in what I would like to call as a Agentic AI native or Agentic AI born company called Dialoga, wherein we have Agentic AI solutions for banking and financial services clients. So that's a bit about me. I'm going to ask my panel speakers to introduce themselves because I don't want to do a disservice to each one, like I said, is a stalwart in their own right. So I'll ask them to introduce themselves, but I have a little bit of a twist. I've asked them to come prepared with one anecdote or one funny thing, one sort of one unimaginable thing that they have experienced in the last 1 year or so with respect to AI, of course, and something that they had not anticipated would happen or could happen in the last 1 year or so. So with that, feel free, but maybe I can just call out names and we can do it that way just to avoid any confusion. So do you want to go first? Quick introduction, and then the one thing that has sort of amazed you in the last 1 year or took you by surprise.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you for offering the opportunity to be here. Hi, everyone. I'm Ritesh Chaudhary. I am a founder and CEO of AI Guru. and no pun intended, I own the trademark. But I've been in industry for over 25 years, and last decade is what counts when we are talking about the overall AI as a journey. I spent about 5 years at Bloomberg. Then I joined AWS, where I ran the GTM for SageMaker. Some of you might know that product, or I launched the Bedrock, which is the ChatGPT equivalent of AI offering from AWS. So I've been into AI for so many years, and then that allowed me to pull to a different venture called Cerebra System. It's a hardware company. We compete against NVIDIA, and today is actually a day, just a couple of hours ago, Cerebras went public. The IPO was there on a NASDAQ, and I left about 6 months ago, yeah, and then started my own company, AI Guru. And primarily we support the build, train, and govern. I primarily focus on governance. Of course, building and training is part of it. Thanks to Starweaver, who is the organizer of this conference, Paul and team actually pulled me into education. If I be modest here, they were the very first one introducing me into the education domain, and since then I have trained over 80,000 people all over the world. But that's about me, and then briefly about the company overall. If I have to say something about a funny of an AI, I mean, I'm into AI. Maybe AI is in my brain and blood for last few years. So I would say nothing surprises me. But to give you a velocity of what we can do today, like Paul was talking about that conference he went a few weeks ago, educational conference. Thankfully, I was in that same conference, and I learned few things along the way while I was there. One thing struck me while coming back on the plane. It was in California. I live here in New Jersey, so 6 hour, nothing to do. It occurred me that, hey, what I learned in that conference is something about AI assessment. I mean, assessment, which is, think of your certifications. And for certifications, you have item banks. Now that for item banks, you have certain items which are pro-generated or created by human. And actually, there is a term called psychometrician. They are the one who actually write those questions. And what I thought through, and as a result of that, I thought, okay, what if I could replace, not completely replace, but augment AI to have a psychometric assessment platform? 12 dimensions like item response theory, differential functioning, Bloom's taxonomy, which I learned while educating. And then there are many other pedagogy references along the way. And over the weekend, by the time I landed, and then by Monday morning, I had an entire platform ready, AIassessment.app, live on the internet, where anybody can go and do that entire psychometric way of assessing, building the item, curating the item, and if they want, take it to the Pearson and bring it to the live audience, right? But again, that's where the market has changed. The overall industry has evolved. The gap between idea and what you can ship is literally collapsed. I mean, in reality, this would have taken me 3 months, 6 months, I don't know how long. It took me 2 days or over a weekend, I could do it. It doesn't mean that I did not slept. I slept. But still, the point is, this is where the industry is heading. This is where if you have an idea, you can make it live over the weekend. And that's the fun thing, at least from what I've seen in last couple of months. Not a year. Year is a long window in AI. What happened in 3 weeks ago probably may not be applicable today. But that's me. Thank you, Praveen.
Thank you. Thank you. That was very, very interesting. Ari, over to you.
Thanks, Praveen. Good morning, good evening, all. I am co-founder and CEO at Enva AI, a voice-native AI coach that develops employees for higher roles or prepares students to get employed after their higher education. In our world of Enworks, AI coach shows up in a video call exactly as how I do now. Act as a coach, mentor, facilitator, or a trainer, depending on the development context. The users who engage could be leaders, managers, employees, future employees, or graduate students, right? And these users engage to develop skills, competencies, mindsets to become either role ready or to become hiring ready. And my own dream is to democratize talent development, to take the most effective way of developing talent or building talent, those approaches to everyone who needs them. So the idea is to figure out how to unlock access. We have been at it for about 5 years. I think just from early days of looking at even prior to the Gen AI, we have been actually working on some of this stuff. Prior to becoming an entrepreneur, I was the chief learning officer at Cognizant, where we had great opportunities to do corporate learning, leadership development at scale. At the time I was doing it, I think we had over 220,000 employees worldwide across 50 plus countries. And I think I learned a lot doing that. Prior to it, I was more of a tech and a business guy. I spent a couple of decades in tech services sector, building software, selling solutions, growing services business in the US market. Really looking forward to discussing this topic that's very central to what I do for a living. Now, to Praveen's question, in terms of what has been very surprising, nothing really, honestly, surprises me with AI. I think that's something which I think since the Gen AI took off, I think I've seen things accelerating significantly. But in the last few months, one thing that has really even delighted me without question has been the emergence of OpenClaw. I'm sure many of you uses it. It has changed my life very much, where I can run agents to do a significant chunk of my work or my chief of staff's work, and sometimes do it in ways that are better than how I would do them. So for example, most of my sales research work is today done by OpenClaw agents overnight. While I sleep, the agents are doing the sales research work for me, figuring out, okay, what's the best way to demonstrate value proposition to a potential customer. I can give you multiple examples of that, right? In sales, in marketing, in my product leadership side of things. So all of that, right? I'm able to do it. And almost I'm able to oversee things using OpenClaw and a kind of army of agents. That is part of it, right? But in personal life, I'm a huge fan and follower of tennis. And it is also a shared interest with my son, who's an aspiring tennis pro. Now, my OpenClaw agent also researches, plans, organizes the tennis coaching and training resources, as well as the playbooks at a professional level, right? In a way, I feel like it's the start of like a true multiplier of myself, right? It's a journey for me as an individual where I am slowly becoming 2x and 5x as an individual. And I think that's been probably the most delightful experience with AI so far for me. Thank you. Again, looking forward to this. Back to you, Praveen.
Fantastic. No, I'm really glad, and I'm glad you are a part of this panel, Hari, and thank you for taking the time for doing this. It's going to be fun. I'm sure the audience is looking forward to it as well. You are the perfect blend of someone who comes from a background and is now attempting to serve clients by using AI coaches and so on. So yeah, looking forward to the conversation. Luca, over to you.
Thank you. Super excited to be here. As you can see from my background, I'm currently in a conference, one of the biggest of the world, about one of the companies that tackle open source at a worldwide scale. And I'm super excited to join this because I'm bringing perspective and discussion that we just had brilliant people from all over the world just a few minutes ago. So especially in technology, managing large fleet of machine agent is becoming challenging. So AI operations and agent ops are the challenge of today because most organizations are challenging this type of thing. More about me. My name is Luca Berton. I'm Italian, living in Amsterdam. I'm CEO of Open Empower, my company where I deliver value to enterprise and highly regulated customers. I'm building AI data center for a company that would love to keep their own IP. And among all, I had the opportunity to work with Fortune 500 companies, and I really like to share what I'm learning and what I'm very challenging and find a creative solution. I have two funny anecdotes to share with you. It was August last year, and I started experimenting with vibe coding. It became mainstream, and I got so addicted that suddenly my night session ended up at 5 a.m. and the sun will start coming up. So I really feel that was my moment to understand that generative AI was not just a chatbot that I can ask where's the bus stop or some recommendation for the movie, and then I keep forgetting things. But it was a tool that I can use for building and I give to my idea some execution. So I now also in my team, I always create a prototype to demonstrate what will be the idea and how we can innovate together. Another final product but we are getting there. Another moment was February this year when I installed OpenClaw, and now I'm running for my blog post. I was at a conference, was able to take some picture, some presentation that I really like, and just chatting with my OpenClaw, I'm able to create some blog posts and sharing this type of content with a broader audience. And this is an effective way how we can leverage AI now. So these are my use cases, and I'm happy to share with you and understand what is your perspective. But from big power, we have also big because the human need to be the so-called human in the loop. I think it's not the right definition. In my opinion, we are people with good taste. They can drive this very powerful machine. Because if we don't take the right direction, it can take, it could be dangerous. At least this is back to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you all for the introduction. I can see there's a good mix of someone who comes with Luca's experience of, really building out the infrastructure and sort of making the agents really work within an enterprise. Someone like Hari with L experience and now helping his clients with, AI coaches, so to speak, that are live. And then we have the AI guru himself in the form of Ritesh. So look, I think the audience, I'm sure, has heard of. In fact, I can take the leap of faith and say would have probably used a lot of the AI agents that are available out there in different shapes and forms. So I'm not going to sort of delve so much into what an AI agent is or what agentic AI is all about, and probably just try and get to the elephant in the room from our topic's point of view, at least, right? Is really doing something without human in the loop even possible? And something as important as onboarding, coaching, and then upskilling people. Is that something that is even doable? And I'm like I explained earlier, the format is a free format. I would invite comments from all the three of you so that the audience gets a different perspective on the same question. So feel free for anyone to sort of go ahead and take a dig at it.
Yeah, sure. I'll jump in and then maybe Hari and Luca, you can chime in as well. Short answer, is it possible? Yes. Is it worth doing it? No. Right. And there could be many reasons. And when we are talking about onboarding or employee onboarding, maybe bringing that in a Active Directory, password reset, system access, all those things, yes, 100% could be possible. Even handing them a policy manual, that is quite likely possible. But teaching them culture, quite likely no. Right? I mean, what is in the policy may not be the exact thing what typically people will do every day. There are likelihood many people will breaking those policies or breaking those rules, and only the supervisor or manager is going to tell them that, hey, you are either breaking this rule or you are going outside of the policy in certain extent, right? And then there are reasons you may not want to follow the policy altogether, right? So from a systems point of view, yes, but from a culture point of view, probably no, right? As I think in the earlier session, somebody mentioned about three things: people, process, and technology. Technology, yes, we can have AI do it, but whether the people part or the process part, which is where the culture fits in, I would say no. You cannot teach AI what the culture is because it's not written in any operating system. It's not in any of AI's training data. It's not even in the book written on by Anthropic or OpenAI, right? So the way to think about it is, in my opinion, is kind of a 3-layer of an architecture, right? You may have a fully autonomous, which is where the agent comes in picture for your routine work, like a password reset or bringing that people into the system. You want to have some sort of an AI-led human on the loop, right? Where you need to have some sort of a skill practice. Maybe it's about operating a machine, or whether it's about how you code it, or whatever the function of that particular role is. And the third would be human-led with AI augmented, the other way, right? Where you want to teach them the culture, because the culture at Amazon is going to be vastly different than culture at Bloomberg. I mean, I learned it the hard way, right? And then the same mechanism applies as you go from one company to the other company. And you need to feed that culture, otherwise that employee will leave in 30 days. I'll take a pause here.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. I think you've touched mostly on culture, onboarding, and to some extent about skilling employees. Hari, do you want to talk a little bit more, dive a little bit more into coaching? Obviously, onboarding, coaching, skilling is all three, very much within the scope of our discussion. But coaching, and that's something that you do for a living. Very curious to hear your thoughts on that. Without human in the loop, by the way. So the elephant in the room.
So I think coaching is probably an area wherein I would say, I think without human in the loop is both possible and actually very effective, right? Coaching, and I think we use the word coaching quite loosely, right? And I think let us just combine the fact that coaching and mentoring are combined or referred to, right, with this larger term of coaching here. By and large, it's a black box process, right? Meaning coaching conversations are confidential in nature. So in such cases, right, if we have a human in the loop, even in today's world, right, I think where there is a human coach, the typical human in the loop's role in there is very limited. Someone else verifying what has happened in a coaching conversation or a mentoring conversation is quite limited. And if you look at across corporate learning organizations, across companies, that is the reality. Now, that level of work, verification work, can be easily done by an AI agent, right? Also, moreover, to look for biases, one can have a separate agent running on a well-defined algorithm separated from the AI models, right? And I'm not saying this theoretically, right? At NWorks, we have agents that act as checkers and of very diverse kinds. So coaching is a fairly straightforward area in terms of looking for a learning workflow or a development workflow where which can operate very effectively and of course very efficiently without human in the loop. Upskilling, by and large, can be performed without human in the loop again, right? Again, you can have AI agents operate on the validation algorithms to validate skill results, right? So this is another area where you can look at it. I think we have to be mindful of where do we need human. I think that's the right way to think about it. Is a way to think is whether we had human in the loop prior to AI. I mean, did we have a human in the loop for a human run process? If the answer is yes, then we should consider one of the two options. Option one, have a human in the loop, but someone who has the judgment and acumen to make the right decisions on behalf of the organization and the employee, right? I think that's key. I think the reason I say that is a lot of the time in corporate learning workflows, we use human in the loop almost for execution comfort, what I call as execution comfort, not really for advancing the effectiveness, right? So here, obviously, if AI is running that workflow, I think we need to have human in the loop, but someone who can actually add value there through the right decisions. Option two, have an AI agent act as a quality or governance agent, reviewing the active agent's work. And we can use either of these options depending on the workflow. So I think one more thing I want to also table here, right? When it comes to this with or without human in the loop, I think we have to also think about learners. And constantly, I think we make an assumption that employees perhaps prefer learning workflows with human in the loop. I can say from experience, right? I think there are places wherein learners would prefer AI only for certain sensitive topics, certain self-awareness conversations, difficult feedback on emotional reflection conversations. There's no performance anxiety, no social desirability bias. So we should not assume that human presence is always better for the learner. I think today the data shows otherwise. There are several use cases wherein we have heard from users, and we do both, right? We do human-led coaching as well as AI coach-led coaching, right? So we know that we need to be looking at what actually the users perceive. So in a summary, what I would say is, I think we should ask three questions. Who specifically is the human and what's their role in the workflow, if they add value, right? Do they improve learner outcomes or is it just L&D comfort? And the last one, and very important one, is human presence regulatory driven or is it assumption driven? I think based on that, we should make those choices.
Fantastic, fantastic. And just to make sure that we are all level set, and I'm level set in terms of sort of where we are using these terms. So we are saying onboarding is mostly to do with bringing a new person on board into a role, into an organization, into a new function. Could be an experienced person too, by the way. It doesn't necessarily have to be a fresher. Yeah, so that's onboarding. Coaching, by and large, softer skills. How to communicate better, how to deliver a bad message, how to give harsh feedback without necessarily making it harsh, that kind of a thing. And then skill is hard skill, right? Learning how to code, learning a new language, learning Python, etc. Great. Luca, before I come to you, I just want to, since Hari mentioned something about his observation of humans actually preferring not to learn from another human, particularly around sensitive topics such as, that come under the ambit of coaching, so to speak. I have a follow-on question in that situation, and perhaps also applicable to hard skills. Given the scenario where AI agent is the one who's really teaching or coaching someone, obviously the AI agent is doing that basis some observations about the learner, right? Now, in a scenario like that, is it fair, and really who has the ownership towards that, let's say, data about the employee, right? Saying the employee is deficient in a certain skill or deficient in a certain behavioral aspect, right? Who owns the data? Is the data owned by the enterprise, by the employer, by the employee, or does the data now become transparent to a third-party vendor who's providing the AI agent? For example, NWorks in this case, right? Let's take NWorks as an example with no disrespect meant. So how do you sort of deal with that data? Because this obviously is sensitive information, particularly when it comes to non-hard skills, right? Coaching skills, etc., is a little personally sensitive information.
Yes. So I'll start it off and then I'll step in, right? I think, see, when it comes to coaching, you still have to follow the same ethics that's followed for those workflows, right? So there are certain ethics that's followed when it comes to coaching conversations. That same level of confidentiality applies. So if it is a human who is doing a coaching, as I said, it's a black box process, right? That data, the coaching data, is considered confidential between those two parties, right? So in this case, it has to be considered between the user and the AI coach and that AI model, right? No human should have access to that particular conversation. In such cases, the only way to check for quality, if you want to be checking for quality, is to have another agent basically verify that using certain algorithms that are independent of the first model. So I think that's really the approach we take. And that approach is usually communicated upfront, right? So that the mechanism that's being used for development is very well known to the end user.
And it's by accepted by the enterprise clients that you.
Yeah. So look, I mean, I'll be lying if I thought that if I said that I expected it to go without too much hitches, right? What is very interesting is that mid-levels and lower levels of the larger enterprise workforce, I think the value of a hyper-personalized coaching conversation, one-on-one coaching conversation, supersedes, right, a lot of these kind of concerns that people have. And people, I think, by and large, right, and I'll be very candid, right, one of the first things people are worried about is, will this get data used by HR for some selection or deselection purposes, right? Once they get the assurance, right, from the organization that that data is not privy to them, right? And obviously we tell them as well that this is not a data that can ever go back to them. And wherever the data can go back to them. So for example, in our case, when it comes to coaching conversations, it's fully confidential. When it comes to skilling practice and skill shifts, that data is available back to the organization. And we tell that to the users, saying that all the skilling information is available back to the organization and they have privy to it. Yeah.
Fair enough. Luca, over to you. Still on the first question about, is without human in the loop really even possible, and how effective is it from your experience?
Thank you for your question. Try to connect a little bit of all the dots. I really appreciate the previous message delivered by AIPE. And I'm a believer that this hyper customized training coach will be the future. Because I'm thinking earlier in my career when I had like a mentor and I was a mentee, sometimes we are bombarded by information. Which certification should I take? Which university should I choose? Where is the best options? And every time we choose one road, we eventually don't choose another one. By that AI is getting predominant, especially because it's not a type of decision that we're making. It's not biased. Everybody we have bias, and we might not realize with our background try to prepare the way how we speak and we convey the message or the intent similar to other people, similar to us. And I see that, for example, in mental health or this type of practice, a lot of people are adopting more like AI assisted system because they don't feel like judged. I also feel more confident speaking with an AI accelerated doctor, but I don't see like being diagnosed by an AI doctor. These are just is that we exacerbate to the limit. CEO of Block before X, before C, there will be an AI company in the future directly. So there will be like an AI brain that aggregate all the data and will create a roadmap and definition of where the company is going. So I can see that definitely the way to developing tool. Nowadays, we don't have a definition, we don't have names, but there will be some tool that can aggregate all the information and convey in a way that maybe is more resonate with my cultural, with type of appetite, with my personal experience, because it's so difficult, for example, in onboarding, design and onboarding process that resonate with all the type of culture, a culture that traditional and more punitive, traditional and more imperative, traditional more process-oriented, and then maybe the way how we operate in our companies is not the same all over the world.
Fair enough. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that perspective, Luca. I'm going to try and sort of move this along. I'm sensitive about the time, and I've committed to keeping some time available for the audience questions as well. So let's flip back from, sorry. Let's just stay with the enterprise, right? And then we'll flip back to the learner and the learner's perspective. But just one question still on the enterprise side. And I'm conscious that a lot of our participants today are from universities and schools. I think the last I checked, the audience has about 90 universities, participants from 90 universities. So that's a fairly healthy chunk. So I'm going to try and phrase the question slightly differently. From an organization's point of view, whether it's an enterprise or if it is a university, more so if it is a university or a learning institute that is in the business of imparting skills and imparting knowledge, how does such an organization measure the effectivity, the success, or the ROI on this whole concept of AI learning or learning with AI agents?
So let me jump in, and particularly what we have seen. It should not be, first of all, it should not be based on how many videos somebody watched or some form of an engagement, right? It has to be ROIs in terms of what is the impact it had. So let's take maybe sales as an example, right? And in an enterprise sales, probably if somebody is doing that sales activity for 90 days and then doing a conversion, and with the help of AI, they are somehow able to convert that into a 30 days, right? So it's not about just a productivity improvement, but it's also about the conversion, right? That somebody is able to, using agents, using AI for that matter, is able to convert that into a 30-day instead of 90-day cycle, or whatever that window is. I'm just using as an example. But that means there is an impact of AI by reducing your sales cycle by X percentage. Now, does that mean that employee is sitting for another 60 days as an idle? Because your typical sales cycle is 90 days. That is, the employee or whosoever the salesperson probably go on a beach for remaining 60 days? Probably not, right? That means they should be able to apply that 60 days to build more pipeline and convert more sales. And as a result of that, the overall productivity or overall revenue on that enterprise or that company or the university, however you want to spell it out, would increase, right? So the ROI is in that sense. If I'm using 1 billion token a day, and if I'm creating a software which I'm going to sell it for $5,000 by spending $1,000 on a token, that's a clear 5x ROI, right? So it has to be measured in a way where people who are using AI for whatever function they are in, what is the impact they are having at the top line or at the bottom line? Not just on an engagement score of that we watched AI training for last 60 minutes or last one hour or for an entire day. That is not the right measure.
Quick take from yourself, Hari and Luca.
Yeah, okay. So I think I agree with Ritesh, right? First of all, business outcomes and performance outcomes always must be the starting and ending point when it comes to this whole ROI conversation, right? By the way, the ROI around organizational learning, when the learning is actually happening, is almost how do I put it? like one of my former CFOs used to say that it's a non-issue because it's such a massive multiplier, right, in any talent that you don't need to think about ROI as long as learning is happening, right? Relevant learning is happening. So that aside, I agree. Business outcomes, performance outcomes is the start point. And again, going back to rhythm pretty closely, right? So we work with a couple of financial services firms today, right? And on their seller productivity. So to coach their sales force, 45 days to productivity is one of the things that we are held to, right? Because they usually take 60 to 63 days and they want to pull it back to about 45, right? So, and he's also right in that they need to be augmented in terms of skills so that they actually build pipeline, things like that, right? But that is the first point. Outputs in terms of skill shifts, mindset shifts can be measured today in real time and at real work. So again, with the AI-based coaching or the tools that you deploy, you can actually measure them in real time. So which also means that you get to track them, use it as part of the learning governance. So this becomes like a lead indicator of progress for the talent transformation. Yeah. So engagement is a hygiene factor. So I don't think we should even think about that much, but it's simply a gate for the outputs and outcomes. So that's really, in a nutshell, how I would look at it.
So would it be fair to summarize this, Hari? Would it be fair to summarize that by in fact having a agentic AI-based learning environment, it's easier to capture some of this data trail as evidence to see the needle shifting, vis-a-vis having the system run in the old way where a human was overseeing and judging whether there is an improvement or not? Would that be
It's a very standardized measure? Yeah, it's a standardized measurement, automatic reporting, all of that, right? Sorry, just one thing with respect to the target with the audience, right? I think you mentioned about universities because we do work with some large universities. There, some of the two major outcomes, right? They look at, because we work on the hiring readiness space, is how many of the students, right, compared to your baseline value, are actually improved in terms of becoming hiring ready and getting hired with the least number of interview gates. So that's one kind of outcome they look at. One specific, fairly almost Ivy League level university looks at what's the premiumness of the roles that they are able to land compared to the prior year. So those are the kind of outcomes they hold us on.
Interesting. Luca, any other thoughts?
Yeah, I really like this concept of velocity, speed up the process, but also I would love to give another perspective. I prefer to add also opportunity, like a grasp that were not possible before, because as we onboard more individuals with different background, we can have also more broad experience. Just because one company succeed in one way to create a process doesn't mean that in the future, especially in this global village where we live, we will do business in the same way. And actually, the organizations that succeed are the ones that onboard the most wide culture and individual. So I think that we should focus more on intention and leverage AI to create a new process and new opportunities. Also, we are approaching the so-called skill economy, where people are recognizable like by some ability. Like in the past, we were like scouting for people with specific language capabilities or like computer programming, I would say. That I think that in the future will be more like strategic and visionary people, the people that can connect the dots and give direction. So just to summarize, my vision is that we will leverage these wonderful tools and eventually create new tools that give us, simplify the way how we interact. I saw one demo from Stripe, famous payment company, that is already partnered with Google to allow payment inside the famous chat. Soon it will be possible to have a conversation with ChatGPT, discover product, and pay inside the same app. And imagine translating this same journey inside the learning ecosystem. We'll be able to find the knowledge, the best expert in the world, and we'll be able to ask him some direct question and get to us. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. Actually, it's a beautiful segue for me, since you talked about the organizations not necessarily being in the same business as they are today, Also, the staff within the organization not doing the same roles that they're doing today, which brings me to this very interesting question, and that's a learner perspective that I want to switch to. So with the advent of and with what we are living and breathing today and seeing AI agents being used for upskilling, coaching, and everything that we've talked about, as a learner, as an employee, what should my North Pole be, right? Should I aspire any longer to be a specialist in something, or should I just be someone who's aspiring to be a good, smart generalist who can keep picking new skills because now I have specialization for free, as I think Hari had referred to it in one of his posts that I'd read somewhere, and it's a very beautiful articulation that specialization today is free. So should I aim to be a generalist, or is there room for an individual, a learner, to still aspire to be a specialist? And anyone who
Okay.
wants to
I
share his
have a
thoughts.
I have a different opinion here. Sorry, Hari. Probably I haven't read your post, but still, I'll say this here. Never a generalist. It doesn't mean that you don't want to be a generalist. You want to be a T-shaped person where you want to have a general or being a generalist, but you want to go deep into one area. And it could be wherever you are coming from, whatever experience you have today, go deeper into that. Maybe it's a finance, maybe it's an HR, maybe it's a sales. Go deeper and become the T-shaped professional. That is my one-line advice if I use that term. I'll hand it over to Hari.
Yeah. Happy to give my perspective on it, right? Sometimes it's an unpopular opinion, but expertise of any kind, honestly, is becoming free and accessible to all, right? So we must be very careful while using the term specialist. I think if specialist implies like a mere understanding of a domain to some degree of familiarity and limited depth, that's not going to cut it. And that's my opinion, because I do believe the frontier models will cover most areas of expertise in the very near future. So therefore,
not to the depth. They will cover.
So I said,
okay.
So I spoke to the limited depth, right? And that's the reason I bring that up also is because we keep talking specialist at mass level. That's the issue. So it's technically the right term. There is actually practitioner. It's not a specialist. If you look at it as a strong learning person, right? You would call that a practitioner level proficiency and not a specialist level proficiency. So I agree with you that extra depth where people have it, specialist of high depth and expertise, who can also be somewhat cross-disciplinary in their approach, which is what you spoke about, the T-shape, and one who can validate lower level decisions in that domain. They are that's the right approach, right? When it comes to specialization. That said, at a mass level, I also believe a generalist of a different kind. And I think, unfortunately, the word generalist got abused quite a bit, right? I think almost it means somebody who has like very, very like skin depth, right? In many, many things. That's not what I'm referring to. I almost will call it a collector of skills, if that makes sense, right? Someone whose master skill is that of learning, right? So one of the simplest example I give is one of the simplest collection of skills is one around sales, right? You could be talking about how a person can have certain business development skills, somebody who can have pitching skills, somebody who can have negotiation skills, a bunch of skills, and those skills are real, which are transferable from one operating context to the next. Person has that collection of skills. They don't have depth in a specific context. I believe in certain areas of that nature, there is still going to be massive opportunities in the coming quarters and the next few years, right? So that's the other track of the journalism that I speak to.
On that note, just to close the loop, right? The hunter versus closer are two different skills. The hunter who is deep into hunting will not be able to close it. The other way, the closer who is deep into the closing would not be able to hunt it, right?
And that applies to very high value, high ticket sales. If you look at a lot of the telesales that happens, right, which is where the mass employment is, that differentiation is much more blurred. There, if you have the collection of skills and the person actually has the ability to practice and build skills, it just makes them so much more valuable.
Right.
And that's the larger point and strike.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I lost track of time. I thought we were going from 10 p.m. India time to 11, but the team has just pinged me saying it was meant to be a 45-minute session. So technically, we've kind of overrun already, and my bad. And I know you guys are running the back room there. My apologies for that. But I don't want to miss out on the opportunity of having you guys sort of, talk to one question that seems to have come up. Actually, there are a couple, but I'll pick one at least from the audience, or else they would feel cheated. So I'm just going to read it as is, verbatim. The question reads, what is your suggestion as nowadays 20-second training contained for a topic and use in live environment immediately? And whenever any problem or issue is faced, need to resolve on immediate basis. I guess I think the person is referring to what's your view on learning in the flow of work and then being able to implement it as is. At least that's my sort of interpretation of the question. So anyone who wants to give it a shot.
Yeah, it's like just-in-time learning, like the previous session was talking about, right? And then maybe the methodology of what TikTok is doing. A small chunk size video where you feed that to user. Oh, I'm into the closing, like going to that sales example. I'm into the closing loop now here. Guide me. How do I close this, right? And then it may not be a 20-second, but yeah, with the concept of a 20-second, we can consider as a 2-minute video or whatnot. That is feasible. And then probably that's where the just-in-time learning, if somebody has a platform to support that kind of a just-in-time learning, that's where it would go into. That's my point of view.
Awesome.
I believe for technical profession, when you have a foundation, you can, of course, have this small digest and small shots. But for overall practice, I don't foresee like training a doctor of this type of profession on this small on this small content. It's definitely a frontier, and this is in the realm of high customized education, I would say, and is what was previously sold like days of training or weeks of training, it could be shrunken down for 1 hour. But I foresee that in the future, we need, for me, an expert is considered a person that taught 10,000 hours on a field. It could be like traditional learning schemas or on hands-on experience, plumber, fashion. I don't foresee this AI technology we have nowadays in mime the jargon, but I don't go too deep in the expertise. We will see. The future is bright. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hari, any closing thoughts on that? Do you think it works, doesn't work?
Yeah, I think learning in the flow of work it's again something which very, very critical, and I agree with I think and Luca. Just make a very clear distinction on the semantics, right? A lot of the time, we sometimes use tool versus somebody who's teaching, or a coach or a mentor, right? I think we have to make a distinction. AI as a tool can help us in the flow of work to create an artifact, close that sale, things like that, right? We are literally using it as a tool. As a learning professional, I'm going to say that's not generating an insight, or it's not clicking something in my head necessarily as a learning activity, but as a performance aid, right? Whereas AI as a coach changes a person, and that is not necessarily going to happen in the flow of work, right? It is augmentation work, right? So that's the distinction I think we need to be able to make.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Thank you very much. Look, apologies again. I know we've overrun, so my sincere apologies. And thank you very much to all the panelists. I hope the audience liked the conversation and they are taking away, a few learnings from the discussion.
Hi. Thank you. Great.